Well, hi class. Today I'm going to be demonstrating using my fabulous printing press that I was showing you how to make an animation about in Adobe Animate, and I thought some of you might find it interesting to see how I would do a print with this thing. So what I've done is I set up my press in my workspace, and I have prepared a plate. I don't know if you can see this, but it is an etching of the feed and grain building I made on a copper plate this afternoon. So it's an acid etch plate. I etched this using vinegar and hydrogen peroxide, but you can see the images in there. These little grooves that you see for the pattern of the image are going to hold my ink as I prepare the plate. So I have my ink preparation area, my plate preparation area over here. I have some black gloves on, which are important. Have my apron on, which is also important because this process can take a little bit of a mess. I also have some paper here in a tray, which has been soaking in water for about 15 minutes. So that will help the paper be pushed into the through the pressure of the press. It's going to push the paper into the plate, into the recessed grooves of the plate. This is called intaglio printmaking. It is a form unlike, say, block printing or relief printing, where you are covering your surface with ink and the raised areas are what gets transferred to the paper, in which you would use dry paper for that, and a very different character of printing. So if you're familiar with lino cut or wood block printing, rubber stamping is a form of relief printing. This is intaglio printing, and that process are processes of printmaking where the paper is actually pushed into recessed grooves. And what an etching does is that an etching, you coat your plate in a black kind of wax color surface, and then let that set, and then you scratch your drawing into the ink with a metal tool. I have a little stylus somewhere, and I did that this afternoon. I went out to the feed and grain building and did a visual drawing by hand on this etched plate, and then brought it back and then soaked it in the etching bath of acid. An acid solution. It's not a super strong acid solution. It had to probably soak for about 45 minutes, a little bit longer than than you would with, say, muriatic acid or hydrochloric acid, but it is a lot safer to use white vinegar, 5% diluted, hydrogen peroxide in a one-to-one relationship, and salt. The salt acts as the catalyst for the reaction with copper. So that actually creates these grooves in the plate, and then you wipe that wax off, clean it off when you're done. You can see a little bit still stuck to the back, and then you should be able to etch your ink. So what I have to do first is I have to push ink into this plate and prepare the plate, and that's what I'm going to do first. I am using Speedball Professional ink. This is black ink. It is oil-based ink, not water-based ink. A lot of printmaking inks you buy at Hobby Lobby are water-based inks. I don't think they work as well for this process. The oil needs to get into the plate more. There's something about the oil itself. Oil has this ability to be very thin at the one molecule level, so it can actually fill into the grooves a lot better and not dry as quickly. And in Colorado, as you hear me coughing away, it is very, very dry here. So this is a very dry climate. So I'm actually in my first go with oil-based inks. The last few times I've done intaglio with wood blocks, I used water-based inks, and those things did, in fact, they did dry out very quickly. So the other tool I have here is an old credit card. This is going to be my fabulous ink spreader. So the first thing I want to do here is I'm going to open my ink up and go over to, I'm going to actually do it on this side so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to grab a tool, this little spatula tool from my paint kit. And I don't know if you can see here, but I'm going to spread some ink, this oil-based ink, out onto the plate. Okay. Spread some out. Okay. That's good. Put that back on. I don't think I need very much. Being oil-based ink, I doubt I need to use too much. And then I'm just going to mix it here onto the plate. Okay, now with relief printing, you would use a block to transfer the ink. With intaglio ink printing, I need to push the ink into my plate. So I'm going to grab my plate here with my gloved hands, and I'm going to just push it into the surface of the plate. Try to cover the whole plate as much as I can with this oil-based ink. So we're going to do that, pushing ink into the plate. Grab some more. I think I got enough. Use the excess, just get it pushed and moved around into the plate of the ink, to the ink here. Now, this is why, of course, I use gloves, because you're going to handle the plate. You got to be a little careful with it too. You don't want to scratch it, because that will hold ink and show up. So I'm just going to smooth it out here onto my plate as best I can before I wipe it. So I'm going to just move it around. Now I've got it pretty well covered for the most part, I think. Moved around in different directions because I've got lines etched into or carved into my etching. It's technically not etched yet. They have been etched by acid, I guess. So these lines are now covered. Now I'm just going to scoop off the excess, scrape off the excess ink off the top surface with my fabulously high-tech old credit card. Don't cut up those credit cards, use them for art supplies. So old credit card tool. And I can see that it is in fact setting into my ink pretty well. So I'm going to scrape off my excess just off the surface. I don't want to go into, I want to be somewhat careful that I'm not carving into the grooves with the ink, because with the scraper, because actually I want to clean that off a little better. So now that that's sort of scraped off, I need to go find a piece of newsprint. At this point, as my hands are pretty inky, I'm going to change my gloves real quick. I go through a lot of these nitrile gloves when I'm doing this stuff, but it's worth it because I do not want a whole lot of ink all over the place. I live in my studio. It's a fairly small studio, and this is also my living space. So, we don't want to mess it up much. So I'm using a piece of newspaper to do the final wiping, and what I'm going to do here is, before that, make sure I grab another pair of gloves here. Printing ink smells a little funky too, although it's not bad. The fumes aren't bad with this sort of speedball ink, and I didn't put very much out on the plate. So there is that. So now I'm going to take my paper, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a flat spot. I'm going to kind of create this sort of pillow shape with my paper. If I had a piece of cheesecloth starch called tarlatan, I would use that first to polish the plate, but I don't have that. So newsprint is going to be my flat surface thing, and I'm going to just rub across the plate with it. So as I do that, it should polish off the excess ink. So I'm just going to wipe it off the surface so that the ink remains inside of the bulk of the ink remains in the etched lines. wipe off the excess with my newsprint, my flattened newsprint. Now, copper has a tendency to want to bend, so I want to do this probably on the surface here. But if it bends too much, I'll wind up going into those drawing areas. So let me just take my newsprint and wipe it down and try to get as much of the surface ink off as I can. Now, sometimes printers print, sometimes in printmaking you can leave some ink on the parts of the plate. That's called plate tone. And some people like that effect. It creates kind of a grayscale. But I'm trying to get most of that off. I don't want a whole lot of plate tone. But this is the first time I've actually done a copper plate engraving like this with this stuff. So let me do my new press. So let me just go through and keep polishing it a little bit. And because it's oil based, I don't have to worry a ton about it being drying real fast, because it's not gonna. It's like oil paint, it's gonna take its time, which is what I like about it. When you use water-based ink, you really have to hurry, and it's not always best thing to do. And you find a clean part of my paper. As the ink gets gunked up, paper gets gunked up, flatten a little more and polish a little more. The little round circular movements. I don't want to go into the lines on the plate. I just want to polish the surface of my plate, of my copper plate, and leave ink in there. And it is leaving ink in there, so that's pretty good. So right now, I don't know how well you can see this, but you can see now black lines in my drawing. These are the engraving, these are the etched areas on the plate that are now holding ink. So with that done, before I start handling my paper now, I have to be aware of clean hands. I'm going to use another set of gloves. Again, I don't want, it may seem wasteful, but you don't want fingerprints all over everything you do. So it does get really fingerprintery, if that's a word. So right now in my press, I have it set up, come over here to where I have my paper over there, over by my room humidifier. The paper is being soaked. I have a couple pieces of blotting paper. These are just watercolor papers that are going to make a sandwich with the plate and the paper. And before I put that down, I'm going to put down some paper towels. Need to get some more paper towel so I can blot my paper before I start printing. So, trying to get out of the way of the camera. So I'm just going to grab a piece of paper here and let it drip dry. I don't want it soaking wet. That defeats the purpose. I just want to blot it. This is why you need to use clean hands, because if you don't, now the paper you want to use has to be sized. It has to take water well, without being so fragile that it falls apart. So it's what's called sized. There's this coating on the paper called sizing, and it helps keep the paper from falling apart when it's wet. So it's suitable for watercolor. But this isn't watercolor paper. Watercolor paper often has. I haven't had great results with watercolor paper that have really heavy tooth on it. It's called tooth, very heavily textured papers. But it is, the lighter papers do better with pressing, at least at home. In my little homemade setup here, I'm not really using a full traditional printing press. Okay, so I've got that set up now on a blotting page. I with the paper. Actually, I'm going to go opposite. Yeah, getting ahead of myself here. I'm going to put the plate on the bottom piece of paper, and I'm going to center it there in the printing press sandwich that I'm making. And then I am going to put my printing paper gently on top. Take another piece of blotting paper, so I have that in a sandwich. And then I'm going to take a couple of these lint-free nap paper towel things that I use. What these do is they help distribute the weight of the press evenly across the paper. In a printing press, you have what's called a felt, and the felt does that. Layers of felting creates an even, as the print goes through a roller at high pressure, the felt helps distribute the weight across the page and the plate, so you get an impression evenly. That's the goal. So that's the sandwich on top. Then I'm going to take my top board, my top press board here, and put that there. And then I have another one here just to protect those boards that I usually place right here. This one gets dented because this is where the 2-ton hydraulic jack goes. This is a 2-ton hydraulic jack. It's accessible from Walmart for like 13 bucks. So this is the small one. I don't want one that is so heavy that it's going to break my press in half when I use it. So we want to be careful with that because it is going to put a lot of pressure on the plate. So this printing press has steel rods and steel reinforcement on this wood beam in order to keep it from breaking apart, but I do have to be careful because it will flex. So it is down, and now I'm just going to jack it up there, just like jacking a car. Trying to get it in the middle of this beam so that it's evenly weighted, and then I'm going to put pressure on it. I'm just going to put some pressure until it feels like it's like tight. Not so tight that again that I'm going to bust it, but as you can't really see it on the film, but this actually is buckling a little, which is fine. It'll flex. These things will flex. I don't want them breaking apart. So now there's pressure on that. I give it a minute, and then relax the printing press. Pressure. Bring the plunger down a little bit. Take it. Press the back off the plate. Take my plates off. Put them aside here. Put this one here and take my plates and see how I did. Take my felting off, my blotter plates, papers, and then big moment, drum roll. Let's see how this turned out. Drum rolling, please. And that's okay. There it is. That is a engraving of the Feed and Grain Building with some color. Now I'm going to I'm going to do another couple runs of this on other papers and get it darker. This is a little light for the first one. First ones are usually a little light, but it looks like it's holding the engraving very, very well. Better than I thought it would. I was really worried about the timing I would need. Now I'm just going to pin it. You can't see here, but I have a little rack by my camera that is going to pin this up to dry. So that's one of them. And that, my friends, is the overall process. I won't take you through the entire process of doing a full edition, but this is how it works. And this is the video that I'm going to put into my little animate example this evening. So I hope you watch it and enjoy it. Talk to you later.